And we're going to talk now about what does it actually take to become a police officer. And so I want to go to a couple of different sources, and when we have the video made here, let's make sure we get these websites scrolling across the top, and let's leave them there for a good long time so people can look this up. Because there are a lot of different pathways to get into this profession, and I can't possibly list every one of them up here. So there are some websites that you can look at which will give you some idea. Let's start with federal law enforcement. When we had our panel up here, we had an agent from the FBI and from the Drug Enforcement Administration. Those were federal officers. So that's a little different level than the others we're going to talk about, but if you want to know what some of those opportunities are, the website you should go to is usajobs.gov. And then you want to search, in the search box, you want to search, just put in the words law enforcement. And what you'll get, and I did this the other day, I got 14 screens worth of federal law enforcement related jobs. And here's just a sampling. We had the FBI and the DEA up here. There are also law enforcement services in the U.S. Marshals Service, the Air Marshals, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The IRS has an enforcement division, the Border Patrol, the Secret Service, Federal Park Rangers, and those actually have a couple different agencies that they work under. And then all of the armed forces, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard, all of them have their own version of military police. And if you go to that website, usajobs.gov, and you search law enforcement, you'll see all these different jobs. You can click on any individual one, and you'll come to another screen that will tell you the requirements, the training requirements, the pay, the location where this position is. And they're all very different. I think the FBI agent explained that to join the FBI and the DEA, you have to have a college degree. That isn't the case with all of these federal jobs, so you can do that search and find out some of those details. But that's very well laid out. There's just so many of them, I can't cover them all here. We are going to focus a little bit more on Minnesota law enforcement, but if you're watching this in another state, stay tuned because I'll explain some things that are similar between states, and I can probably give you some direction in which to follow here. So if you go to this website, dps.mn.gov, and DPS is short for Department of Public Safety. That's a state agency. dps.mn.gov. And you go in the search box and you search how to become a peace officer. Not police officer, but peace officer. You will find a very succinct page that will actually tell you step by step what it takes to become a licensed officer in the state of Minnesota. Now, I say licensed because in our state, there's a state board called the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. We call it the POST board for short. That's the state agency that licenses all of us individually as cops. And you have to have a license from the POST board to be a cop in Minnesota. And the POST board has very clear education and training standards. If you're watching from another state, there is most likely a very similar type of board on the state level that establishes the criteria that you have to meet to become a peace officer. So there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could go to the state website for whatever state you're in, and you could do some searching about requirements to become a peace officer or police officer. And if you just can't find anything, you could even call your local law enforcement agency, and you could just ask the question, do I need to be licensed as an officer in this state, whatever state you may be in? And if so, what's the regulatory board that sets those standards? And they should be able to answer that question for you. So let's focus on Minnesota. And we're going to talk about the following. We're going to talk about the education and training requirements. Those are established by the POST board. And then we're going to talk about the hiring processes, because even if you've met all the POST board requirements, now you still have to get a job. So then we're going to talk about the hiring processes, the background investigations that are conducted, medical exam, psychological exam, and then the field training and the ongoing training that we provide once you're hired. Okay. And if you're watching this video at home and you can find that, that state website, that dps.mn.gov, and search how to become a peace officer, you should be able to follow along with what I'm saying now and with some more detail. But the first thing is, and this is set by the Post Board, is you have to have a college degree to be a peace officer in Minnesota. And I say peace officer because that's the wording they use when you're licensed. So everybody up here on the stage today, whether it was a police officer or a sheriff's deputy or a state trooper or a conservation officer, all of them are licensed as peace officers. So to become a peace officer, to be licensed, you have to have a college degree in Minnesota. It can be a 2-year associate's degree, or it can be a 4-year bachelor's degree. And that degree needs to be in a criminal justice related major. So when you go to that website, you will see a list of colleges that are certified to teach criminal justice majors. And there's a lot of them. They're all over the state. Okay? And from one of those, you need to earn a 2-year or a 4-year degree. Now, suppose you already have a college degree and it's not in criminal justice. That was the case for me. You can go to any of those colleges and you can get what's called a certificate program. What that means is they will give you just the core classes that you need to, in effect, take your political science major that I had and kind of convert it to a criminal justice major. That's called a certificate program. So if you've already got a college degree and now you're thinking you want to get into this field, if you don't have a criminal justice degree, you go to get a certificate program from one of those schools. Once you have either the degree or the certificate, now you have to complete what's called a skills class, and that would be the Minnesota version of a police academy. Now, unlike some other states, you don't go to the police academy after you've been hired as a cop. You go to the police academy or the skills class before you get hired. That's one of the differences. So you go through this skills class, and in many of these schools that teach criminal justice, they roll that right into your 2- or 4-year degree. But if you've already got your degree, you can come back now and go through that class separately. That is I believe it's a 10 or 12-week class now. And there is another alternative. If you happen to be someone who's later in life and you've already got a career and you've got a family and you can't take 10 to 12 weeks off just to complete the skills course, there is something called a pathway program. There's a select number of agencies that use this. I know the State Patrol does, and there are some law enforcement agencies in Hennepin County that do. But you'd really have to call these police agencies individually and see which ones take part in the pathway program. What the pathway program will do is take someone who's in another profession, they'll hire you first, now you're committed to that police department, and they will put you through the certificate and the skills program as a paid employee. And once you complete those, now you're hired as a police officer and you're already on the payroll. So if you're really looking to change careers and you just can't afford to start from scratch, that would be an option for you. You'd have to contact individual agencies to see if they offer that. And then the last path you could take is if you're a licensed officer in another state, then you can take a reciprocity exam, which basically gives you credit for your police work somewhere else and allows you to come in to Minnesota. So once you've completed all of those, now you can take a written post-licensing exam. So the exam is basically saying, okay, you've been educated, now we're going to test your knowledge. It's just a written test. But once you've passed that test and you've met these other requirements, now you are eligible to be licensed as an officer. And what you have to do to get licensed now is get hired. So you start applying for police jobs. And the Department of Public Safety has a website where pretty much any police opening in the state is posted, so they're not hard to find. I'm going to describe our hiring process in Champlin. I think it's very, very typical. Other agencies will do it a little bit differently, but I think this will give you a good idea of some of the standards you have to meet. The first thing is, for us, is you just have to complete an application. That's fairly simple. Ours is now done online, and it just asks to verify that you've met the education and training requirements. And then once you've applied, and if you're qualified through the application, we will give you a written test. Our written test covers arithmetic, reading comprehension, grammar, and writing. And if you've completed college, even 2 years of college, you shouldn't have a terrible problem completing this test. Occasionally we get people who stumble on one portion of the test. Typically they brush up on their math or whatever it was they didn't do well, come back and take it again, and most can pass it the second time. But if you're going in for a test at any police department, maybe just brush off the old math book or something. It's not real high-level math or reading or writing, but it's basics, and you need to be able to do it. If you pass that, then you're going to do a series of interviews. And the picture you see up here is pretty typical. It's a detective and a couple of cops, and they're interviewing a job applicant. If you're not real good at interviews, my advice is practice. There's plenty of websites you can go to online that give you sample interview questions. I can't give you specifics on the questions we ask, but interviewing is something you can practice and get better at. Then we have a physical agility test in Champlin. And again, this is just our test, but this is not a real uncommon one. And so if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I think I can do all the academics, but I'm not sure what kind of shape I'm in, my advice would be start exercising. Here again, if you look at these standards, we need you to run 1.5 miles in 16 minutes and 28 seconds or faster. That's not terribly fast, but you've got to be able to run. We want you to run 300 yards in 71 seconds or less. Again, that's not Usain Bolt speed. It's just a moderate sprint. You have to do at least 15 push-ups, at least 25 sit-ups within 1 minute, and you have to be able to jump vertically up off the ground 14 inches. That just kind of measures your mobility. So other departments have different tests. I think some have no physical agility tests at all. But if you're concerned at all about what kind of physical condition you have to be in, this would be a good standard to try to meet, and I think you would be able to do it. Okay, if you pass our physical agility test, we're going to conduct a background investigation. And we're going to talk to pretty much everybody you know, and maybe even some people you forgot about. And so the question is, what are we looking for? Well, let me start right off by saying we don't expect you to be perfect, and we don't expect you to be a saint. We hire human beings, and we know human beings have different life experiences and things happen. If you go to that website I cited earlier, the dps.mn.gov site, they will list on there for you a list of crimes for which, if you were ever convicted of any of those, you can't be licensed. So if you have any sort of criminal convictions in your background, you need to go to that site and find that list and see if your conviction is on there. If it is, you can't be hired, at least not in Minnesota. If it's not, we're still going to find out about it in the background investigation. What we're looking for is some assurance that whatever misbehavior you've had in the past, that you learned from it and that you moved on and that you're not that same person anymore. Don't bother trying to hide it, because we'll find it. We wash a lot of people out in background investigations, not because of what they did, but because they didn't reveal it. So we're going to find it either way. Just reveal it and be honest about it. And, frankly, if you haven't moved on from that lifestyle, you shouldn't be a cop. You should do some maturing and growing up and, give it some time and come back to it. But those are the kind of things we're going to look for. The other thing we're going to do is conduct a psychological exam, and that's actually required of us by state law. So I'm going to just kind of go through a list of qualities that we look for, both that we like in candidates and that we don't. And this comes from a psychological testing service that we do. So here's some what they call beneficial qualities. That you're comfortable with people, that you use your time productively, that you reason in an analytical and rational manner, that you are willing and confident to move into situations that are unfamiliar, that you can take directions, because we do have a chain of command and we expect our officers to take direction from supervisors, that you can take charge without being domineering, that you're emotionally calm and resilient, that you make wise, self-disciplined choices, and that you function comfortably as a member of a team. Now, here's some qualities that we find undesirable. That you're overconfident, that you're lacking in accountability, that you're lacking in confidence, that you are reluctant to take action, that you do not tend to be comfortable waiting until you have adequate information upon which to make your decision, which is kind of another way of saying you're impulsive, that you demonstrate cynical or negative attitudes, that you have an undue amount of drinking or drug use. Frankly, any drug use we don't want, although if it's far enough in your past, we'll consider it. But certainly undue amount of drinking or any drug use would disqualify you. That you lack emotional stability, that you would do the job in an unstructured or disorganized manner, that you have difficulty operating within a chain of command, that you're disrespectful in dealing with others, and then a real broad one here, that you demonstrate active symptoms of unaddressed mental health issues. That's obviously a real big one. If you have concerns about any of those and you think, geez, I don't want to get through all of this training and all of this education just to get to the psychological exam and have them wash me out because of some of these, you do have the option of going to a psychological testing service and just say, listen, I'm thinking about a career in law enforcement, and I'd like to get tested and just see if you think there'd be any concerns for a department, because I know they're going to do a psychological test. And that certainly would be an option. Most people pass their psychological test, no problem. But it is something, if you have some concerns, it's something worth looking into. Okay, then we send you to a medical exam and drug screen. If we find evidence of illegal drugs, we're not going to hire you. But what else do we look for in the medical exam? Well, here's some specifics. We need you to have vision that's correctable to 20/20. And we need you to have hearing within the normal range. There again, that can be correctable. If you are, well, we need you to have cardiovascular fitness. And we did the physical agility test, but there again, the doctor's going to check to make sure your heart is healthy. If you're over 40, they're actually going to do a cardiovascular stress test. Again, this is our protocol, but I don't think this is uncommon. And then they're just going to look for any injuries or disabilities that limit your mobility. You can have injuries, you can have disabilities, but we need you to be mobile due to the physical nature of the job. And so those are the things that we're looking for then. And so if you get through all of that, then you're hired. Then we'll stand you up here and we'll have your family come in and we'll swear you in and we'll get you started. And the first thing we're going to do, this kind of circles back to something we talked about before, is training. And then we're going to do some more training, and then we're going to train again, and then when you're really tired of that, we're going to train you some more. Your first 4 months on the job with us will be in a squad car with a training officer sitting right next to you, teaching you how to do patrol work. Now, Champlin is a city police department. We focus a lot on patrol. Other agencies, like the ones we had up here, will focus on different things. But if you're going to work for a city police department, we're going to put you in a squad car with a training officer, and their job is to help you. It's not to make you uncomfortable or to put you on the spot. It's to help you learn the job so you're comfortable doing it. And we won't let you out alone in that squad car until you're comfortable and you're competent. Now, you'll have years and years of more and more learning to do, but we certainly aren't going to just throw you out there if you're not ready for it. So we do that for at least 4 months with a training officer, and then we have another officer kind of shadowing you for the remainder of that whole first year, just making sure that you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. And then we do additional training, all of us, new people and people who've been there forever, every year. We do lots of training on top of that. We do training in wrestling like this. We use the force training. We go to the gun range 3 or 4 times a year. We do first aid training every year. We do driver's training every 3 years. We do legal update training every year. We do online training, which tends to be more legal or procedural updates, monthly. We do a lot of training. And the whole idea is we need to keep you comfortable and confident in knowing what you're doing. So the training really never ends, but you know, once you get through that first 4 months to a year and you're out on your own, and this is going to be my closing, then you're going to do this. You're going to go out on the street, maybe with a partner, maybe not, and you're going to work. And by and large, you're not going to be in the news. You're just going to be doing your job. Even though this is my closing, there are some inaccuracies in here. There's not 1 million cops in our country, there's 800,000. And the whole thing about flawlessly protecting your streets, the truth is we don't do anything flawlessly. We hire human beings. Human beings aren't perfect. They're certainly not flawless. We don't expect our people to be flawless. We're always striving to be the best we can, but we're not flawless. But we do think that for the most part, we go out every day and do a job that's important, that helps people, that protects people, that does all of the positives that you see here, and certainly experiences some of the negatives that you see here. And we find ways to cope with those and to deal with those and to moderate those. But ultimately, everybody you saw up here today, and I talked to every single one of them individually, they like their jobs. And I didn't make that a condition for any of them to take part. I just got people who were willing, and I said, well, let's talk about your job. And all of them liked their job. All of them had some feeling that I go out, do the best I can, do something that's important, that's worthwhile. And so I'm going to close with this. I appreciate your watching. If you have specific questions anywhere in the country you may be about this as a profession, I would encourage you to seek out your local law enforcement agency. No matter where you live, there's an agency that serves your community. And just ask them questions and try to get a better feel for this. So thanks for watching, and thanks for being here.